So I'll give you an example of one thing that we did to address that issue. It was in new apartment buildings being built that would be owned by multiple owners. And the builders were not willing to make the investment needed to build to the highest green standards because the savings would be in the future owners. So we created a loan facility with our government using our regulatory power to assign it to against the future owners, but give it to the builder. So the builder would use it to build in the highest green standards, but the future owners would have to pay it back. Now, they didn't have a choice in the matter because the building came that way, but they got lower operating costs and a better building. And what happened is the market took over because the builders discovered that there was more demand for green buildings. So they were actually able to make more money, and they ended up finding private ways to do it. But we did this for a number of years to solve that exact problem. Yes?
Fergus O'Rourke from Clean Biz Asia. This is a question, I guess, to the mayors of the cities that have service-based economies. In such cities, information technology infrastructure is a rising source of power consumption. Should your cities have a strategy for dealing with that, and if so, what?
Well, I think that's a very, very good question. And I recall yesterday when I was attending the Green Building Council event, one of the awardees was in fact a new building housing a very big data center. So that says that, well, actually, yes, while data center or IT users could be a major energy consumer, but at the same time, if we believe typically in a service city or a market economy like Hong Kong, New York, and other places, the dollar cents, the dollar also makes sense in a way that, well, awareing that they could be the major energy consumer, they could be the energy saver, and therefore they could also be the pioneer. So I'm impressed with that award scheme, actually sort of highlight that point, that that's a very strong reminder that, well, different industry, be they IT, data center, wherever, there exists a scope for us to do more. And regulation may need to come in if things would not be able to change, or if there could not be a level playing field. But certainly, I think sometimes incentive, economic intrinsic savings, or awards like the Green Building Councils could be a driving force as well. Thank you.
I actually think that's a question for the past. I don't think you asked the right question, because if you see what's happening, we've gone from big TVs to flat screens. We've gone from big computers to small computers. The amount of consumption that any particular device uses has gone down dramatically. Number two, we're going in the direction of cloud computing, or what you might, in the olden days, mainframe. Remember, we went from mainframes to distributed processing. Everybody wanted distributed processing. It never made any sense to me. If you look at my company, we've always had a mainframe, because the management of data in multiple places is just impossible to do. So you want to hold it in one place. And New York City just signed a deal with IBM to move an awful lot of our computing onto their cloud, if you will, meaning their servers. Will close most of our data centers, save us a lot of money, save us a lot of energy, save us a lot of personnel, get us more reliability, better backup. And the places the big data centers that Google, for example, would have, they will go to places where they can buy hydropower very cheaply, because the communications doesn't really, in this day and age, make that much difference where. So it's going to be a very small number of places that have high energy usage for IT. And in fact, the old requirements for lots of air conditioning and raised floors and those kinds of things, it doesn't exist anymore. My foundation just renovated a building that was built in 1898, no raised floors. I mean, everything is just today wireless and very low power consumption, and it's a lot easier to come up with a green building, and we have an awful lot of technology there.
I don't think any of us can trump Mayor Bloomberg with that answer. So I've got your hand, sir. I should have gone over here first because this woman put her hand up right at the beginning. So I'll go over there, but I will come back. I see 4 or 5 hands. That's probably all we can take, okay? Yes.
So just actually on that issue of Renita Malhotra from Reuters Insider Sustainability Asia channel. On that issue of cloud computing, data centers, data farms, there's a lot of contention about, their energy intensiveness. For example, you mentioned Google. I mean, Google uses a number of different data farms. From what we understand, it really depends on where the input comes from. If the input comes from a clean energy source, great. But a lot of the time, these data farms and data processors, data processing units are supplied by, coal-fired plants. Can you shed any light, some of the other mayors perhaps, on where your data centers are, how clean are they, and what is the power supply?
Okay, well, I think you've heard from two of my colleagues.
Yes.
I guess I can add Toronto is a very significant IT center with worldwide scale and ambition. Our data centers are the same as everything else. In the sense that their electricity in our context comes from a mixture of coal, hydro, nuclear. So we have an energy strategy based on the principles of conservation, demand management, and distributed energy, particularly using green power. And to the extent that some data centers that are more traditional, the Mayor Bloomberg describes, will continue to be used large sources of power consumption, we need those data centers. On the other hand, in buildings, there are very low-hanging fruit through conservation, demand management, distributed energy to significantly lower the energy consumption of any city. So I think you have to look at it in the context of that overall strategy. Ours is called the Power to Live Green. It sets out precisely how we're going to meet the Kyoto targets plus through that energy strategy, and we're confident it'll work through things like ground source heat pumps, solar and wind. Okay, in the middle, yes, sir, you've been patient.
Hi, I'm Min Lee from the Associated Press. I have two questions for Mayor Bloomberg. The first question is, you've talked a lot about what New York is doing to reduce its carbon footprint, but in a sense, New York is sort of an anomaly in the U.S. in the sense that it's densely populated. There's a great public transportation system, but how realistic is it to implement what New York is doing nationwide, say in the Midwest, where urban sprawl is very common? And my second question is, I hope you will indulge a quick question about politics. Could I get your quick thoughts on the midterm elections and what you think? No, okay.
You got a quick answer to your quick
Your first question was, once again?
My first question was...
I understand the question. New York is different, and it's different mainly in the ratio, the concentration. We're very similar to Hong Kong. I met with the executive this morning, and per capita, we both have virtually identical greenhouse gas emissions. And it's because people live concentrated high-rise buildings, a lot of people walk to work, or they take mass transit. They're just not, you can't get around Hong Kong very well or New York City in cars. There's just a limited number of roads, and so what is appropriate for New York isn't necessarily appropriate for any place else, but an awful lot of what we do is in a different form. For example, trees. Trees add to property value, but trees also clean the air. We have a program to plant 1 million trees. So far, we've put in 365,000. But that will, a lot of other places, they can add trees, and that would do it. Mass transit isn't very practical underground because of the expense, but buses using technology that changes the lights and makes the buses go much more rapidly will get people out of cars, and when you get into the areas where there's sprawl, that's even more important than it is for New York City. So some of the things are applicable. In terms of the midterm elections, they are what they are. Government goes on. We've had a democracy for 234 years, and there's no reason to think that we aren't going to continue with ours. And I'm nothing but optimistic for the future of America.